Before we continue with the video, if you like what I'm doing here on this channel, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel a lot. Anyway, let's get back to the video. So in this tutorial, we're going to be showing how you can create a charged attack for a 2D animation. So we have this character over here, which we can start playing with. And while we're in here, we can just press down our key to start our charge animation, which causes an effect to be generated, in this case around the sword. And whenever we release, then that Niagara system is then despawned and our attack completes. And that is all. So that's what we will be going through in this episode. Welcome back. In this tutorial, we are going to be creating a charged attack inside of Unreal Engine using PaperZDS animation blueprints. So let's get started with it. What we are going to be doing is essentially creating a sequence of events. We have if you've been following the previous episodes on PaperZD, you probably have this set up already, but if you're not following that, you can still follow along. It will be fairly easily explained anyway. In this case, we have a bunch of sprites here that represent actually a sequence of several attacks. In this case, if we open up this light attack here, this sprite flip book, you can see the attacks that are available to us. If we go through these frame by frame, we can sort of see that there are some that sort of, if we focus on one attack at a time and cut it out to just work with that to begin with, we can see that we can sort of make use of this for our purposes. So we can see there's a frame over here, a sprite, and then a sprite here, and then on the third one it starts. So we could have something like this being the charge up, because when you're doing a charge animation, or a charge attack in 3D as well, you tend to have three different stages happening. You have first the transition into the charge, which we could consider just this 0th frame to be. Then we have the actual charging pose, which could either be, in this case, we're going to be having one sprite, one frame, which consists of the charging or loading up the attack. You could also have something that's animated, like switching between two different frames or more frames than that as the charge, if you wanted to have it some life as well. But essentially we have a charge up, we have a charge, and then we have a release. So that will be the remaining parts of the attack then essentially. So if we look at this, we can see that, okay, maybe using frames 0 to 8 is going to be good for us. Maybe 0 to 7 even. So we'll go to our folder here and we can take the 0th sprite and we create a flipbook from it, and we can say that this is the pre-charge. We were going to use sprite number 1 as the charge, so we'll call this one just a flipbook of charge. And then we can use 2 to, I think it was 7, and create a flipbook, and we can say that this is the charge release. So now we have flipbooks for the three different components that we're going to be needing for our animation. Now we need to have a way of presenting this in our animation. So we can make use of our animation graph. In this case, we have an animation graph over here. And this is the current setup we have here, and this doesn't really matter for the most part. If you had something just idle running or something like that, that would be enough for the purposes here. So we're essentially going to be using, and this is one way you can do it. There are many ways you could approach this and create a charge-like attack. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a jump node, sort of like how we created attack here earlier. And we're going to be adding that and having it transition back into idle through its life cycle essentially. So let's go to our, actually while we're still in the animation blueprints, let's create 3 states for this. Let's create a state that's going to be our pre-charge. And let's create another state, which is going to be our charge. These will directly correspond to the 3 flipbooks that we created now. So this one will be our charge release You can name these something else, of course, if you feel that the names are not descriptive in your opinion. But essentially we're going to be transitioning from the pre-charge to the charge, from the charge to the charge release, and then back to idle. That's going to be the general purpose. And in the pre-charge we're going to be playing our we haven't created the animation assets. Let's create the animation sequences. So we open up our animation source here and we add a new animation sequence. We call this one pre-charge. We add another one. We call this one charge. We add a third one and we call this charge release. So for the pre-charge, we're going to be using our flipbook, which is called pre-charge, which is just one frame. Our charge, we're going to be using our flipbook for charge, which is again only one frame. And then for charge release, we are going to be, charge release. Did I click the wrong one? I did click the wrong one. So pre-charge over here is supposed to be the pre-charge, and the charge release is supposed to be the charge release. So the actual attack here. So that's all good. Let's make sure that we save all of these. So now that we have our animation assets, we can now add them to our animation blueprint. So this was the first pre-charge state, the one that we start with. So we just say play charge and we use the pre-charge and hook it up. Important to note here is that this is not a looping animation. We just play it once and then we're done with it, because it's just going to be transitioning into the charged state. Then we have the charge, which we do a play charge for. Hook it up. This one will be a looping because we will be keeping it in a charging state for as long as we want to. So in our case here, we're going to be creating a key press, and as long as we hold the key down, we will be charging. So we will be standing in this transitioned state until we're done, essentially. Charge release will play the animation sequence for charge release, of course. And this again will not be a looping because it's just releasing the animation, so it's just playing through it and then it's done. So now we have all the three different animations created here, and that's fine. While we're here, we can also create our jump that we're going to be needing. So we can name this to something like charge attack, and name it properly would be helpful. And this charge attack will essentially be our entry point, so we can start this sequence back. And we can go like this. So now we have a starting point we can go to. We can go to these different states, although we don't have the transition rules set up yet, but we'll sort it out soon. And then once the attack is done, we'll go back into idle. So let's actually start fixing our things that we need to do. First, we need to go to be able to jump to this charge attack. To do that, we will go to our character blueprint. And we did something similar before with our attacks. So in this case, we're going to be creating a input. So we'll go to project settings, we'll go to inputs, we'll create an action mapping, and we'll say charge attack. And for this, let's use the key for maybe the E key will be fine. There we go. Now we can close it down. In our blueprint character, we can now say charge attack, and we get our action event for that. What we want to do here is we want to start activating the ability on pressed, and we want to deactivate the charging on release. To keep track of this, we will be making use of a variable just to make things simple. So we'll create a boolean which we can call charging. We'll set this variable and copy paste it on the press and on the release. So when we press it, we will be starting to charge, so we put the charging to true, and when we release it, we'll put the charging to false. That's all that we will be doing for this part. Next, we need to jump. So we'll copy this or you can just create this from scratch using our animation component, which is on our character, getting the anim instance from the animation component, and then doing a jump to node. This jump to node we will be jumping to when we're actually pressing the key, and the jump name that we're going to be using is the one that we created for the node. So if we go into our animation blueprint here, we have charge attack. So just copy that and put it in here. So now we have the ability to transition between these different things. We can jump to the actual jump node now. So let's go back to our animation blueprint and start making our transitional rules for this. The very first stage of our charge up is the pre-charge. This one is not looping, it will play only once. So once this has played, we want to transition into charge. So the only thing that we need to do here is essentially go in here, right click and type in time remaining, and then it will automatically detect that we are transitioning from the pre-charge. And we can say here that we want to have the ratio, and we can say that it's supposed to be equal to and 0. So if the time remaining is 0, then we transition, because then we have played through this part of the animation. So now we have done that, and we enter into the charge. The charge is looping, and we want to stay in the charge until we actually release the attack. And how do we do that? Well, we just handled it by having this boolean which determines when we're in a charging state or not. So if we go into our charge to pre-release transition here, we can use our characters reference, which we have since previously. And from here, we want to get the variable, which in this case is called charging. And we want to say when this is no longer charging, then we want to transition, because that's when we have released. So we just type in not and go up to top here and get the not boolean node. Hook that up here. And now when we are no longer charging, this will transition from the charge to the charge release. And the charge release is just going to be the attack. So going in here, we can just say that this again is not looping. That's how we set it up here, if you remember. Charge release, not looping. And it should be transitioning back into idle once it's done, essentially. So again, we can just do time remaining for the ratio. We could also use, if we wanted to, time remaining. This one is taking the actual time left, and these are essentially, because we're comparing against 0, either of these would work just fine. So we're going to check against 0 again here, and we're going to say that when we have actually played through the animation, then we're going to be done. Okay, so theoretically now, if we play and I hold down the E key, the character goes down into the pose. You might have noticed the first frame which it went through before it ended up in this, which is our charging, and then when I release, you can see it does the attack and then goes back to idle. So the functionality is there. It looks okay-ish. We can see that there's sort of a jump in the end of the transition before it goes back. You might be fine with this, but we could take this opportunity to actually go through this a little bit and see if we can fine-tune it. So we check the charge release here. Good way to check this might be something like we add a keyframe, and in here we add, so this is the index that I've just added now, so we could add a sprite here, and we could go for the first frame of the idle sprite. This is part of the idle flickbook, but it's the idle sprite that's the first frame. So if we click this one, this will be what it actually looks like when it transitions. So from 5 to 6, this is what it looks like. And it's sort of a little bit of a jarring transition because the character is not really in the same place and it's doing a lot of movement in one frame. What we could do is we can move the frame 5 to the end over here and then see what it looks like if we're transitioning from frame 4 to the idle. So now we can see that the character is in a little bit of a better position. It's not jumping as much. And if we were to use the third frame, it might be actually too much. So let's say that we feel like this 6th frame was too much. We want to transition from the 4th frame instead, or the 6th frame now, it was the 5th frame before. So we want to have it from the 4th frame instead. We can just make sure that the 4th frame is our last here. So we remove the last frame here and the idle that we put here temporarily to just check against. And if we now look at the attack, you can see that the transition looks a little bit better in my opinion. And since we were editing the charge release directly, then we also get to see that it immediately is updated because we are just using the flipbook directly in our animation sequence. Anyway, so now we actually have our charge attack in place, but it doesn't look very fancy. So let's just do something simple to make it look a little bit fancier. Let's create a Niagara system so we can have some sort of effect. So let's create a Niagara system. New system from selected emitter we can choose, and let's go with something like, what will be a good one? Hanging particulates. Let's go with this one. So we press the plus and the finish. We can call this Niagara system NS charge. Let's try that again. Charge, like so. So inside of here we have this system of floating particulates. If we were to put it into the world, we'll see what it looks like. All the yellow particulates are marked. We can see that it's pretty big. We just want to use something really small, something that's somehow centered around our blade for the character's animation. So let's check here. We have a shape location, which is box plane, and we have a sphere location. We only need one of these, I think, so we'll remove the box plane and keep the sphere. And the sphere radius is, if we save now and check, we can see that it's pretty big. So the sphere radius is 125. Let's try something smaller, maybe 25. See what that looks like. It's smaller. We'll see what it looks like in a little bit. It also looks like a lot of particulates. Let's go to our emitter particle spawn here and go from particulates are sort of big. Let's make them a bit smaller. Let's make them from uniform sprite size here, min and max. Let's go from 1 to 2 instead. That'll make them smaller. And let's change the color to something fancier. If we go and change our red color to 20, we'll make it sort of bright and emissive, as you can sort of see over here if we hover in. That might be a nicer look as well. Let's reduce the amount of particles, I think. So our spawn rate says that we should have 50. Let's try something maybe along the lines of 10. Might be okay. Loop looks sort of long as well. What do we have currently? We have loop duration 2. That seems like a good loop duration, I think. We have currently, we can see on the particle updates here, we can see that we have a bunch of different components here that are affecting it. One of them that we have is the curl noise, which is making it run around in random directions. I think I want something that's feeling a little bit more charged. So we're going to be removing the curl noise, I think, and adding point, is it called point attraction force. Something like that, which will make it grow towards a point essentially, which feels sort of like it's charging up energy, right? And we can make the attraction strength something bigger, maybe 15, so it goes a bit faster. We can also see that they sort of like clump up and last a little bit longer than getting to the center here. So that's something that we could change a little bit by particulate scale color here. We can see that the scale of alpha is going from 0 to 1 over time and then back to 0. We could, let's see, where is it? Show curve in the overview. We could move this around a little bit, make it go a little bit to the left. That means that it'll go showing a bit earlier and then it will start declining faster. We could take one of these tangents to move it down a bit so we can have the decline go faster so it fades out faster. It's starting to look a little bit better. I think that will be good enough. We see what it looks like. So this is sort of what it looks like in Engine, and we'll remove that for now. And what we will do is we will go to our character and we'll go to our animation blueprint, I think, and we can go to when we have our, where is it? We go to our new state machine. When we have our charge here, we can hook up to some events. You can see on state enter event and state exit event. So since we don't know how long the charge will last, we want to have it dynamically react when we leave it. So we can't hard code this. And we shouldn't hard code it, of course, at all. But this is a good place to have it, I think. So we can create some events here. We can call this charge start and charge stop. That's easy enough. So these names are now events that are available, although when we go to our event graph now, we don't immediately see them here. But if we go in and type in custom event and use the name charge start, this event will now be called when we enter the event for charging, essentially. And from here, we want to spawn a Niagara system. So spawn Niagara system attached, because we want to attach it to something. And what we want to attach it to is our character. So if we get our character and we want to get its sprite. So this is the sprite component. So get flipbook sprite. No, not flipbook, sorry. We just want the sprite. So this component here is the paper flipbook component object reference. This is what we want to use as our attach component. And from this we can also create a socket, but we don't have a socket currently. So if we go to our character and open up the charge sprite, which is the index 1, we can create a socket here, which we can name something like charge point or something. And we can copy that name. And then we can mark it here and place it somewhere so it looks like it's on the blade or something like that, maybe near the tip. Save and then close it out. In our animation blueprint, we can now say that we want to attach this to the socket by taking our sprite and get socket location, pasting in the name that we just named it to, and use that as our location. Now we just need a system, and we created our NS charge system here. So now we have that available. So this will essentially spawn it, but we want to be able to shut it off also later on. So to do that, we'll save a reference here. So we promote it to variable, and we rename this to be our charge effect. Let's have it charging effect, like so. Compiling and saving, and then we can go back to our let's see here, where are we? Animation graph, state machine. We want to have the name of the event that we used to stop also, and then we go back to our to our event graph over here. So we create another custom event and use that name over here. So this will be the event when we have actually finished charging. We release the attack essentially. So this is when we can make use of this charging effect. And we can just say destroy component, which should kill off the Niagara effect. Yeah, let's see what that looks like. So we start playing, we press E, and nothing is happening. Let's see if we can find what is wrong. Okay. Right, so mistake by me. I believe that this is the issue here. Get socket location we can't get from the sprite like this. When we want to attach a Niagara system to a sprite's socket location, we need to use the attached point name over here, I believe. And then remove it here, and it should use the location 000 like so. That should attach it properly, and let's try that out and see if it works. Okay, so now you can see that we're getting the charge attack by our weapon tip there. It doesn't look super awesome or anything like that. You can for sure make more cool effects than that. But then releasing, you can see that it gets destroyed and then we do our attack. So that's essentially what we wanted to create in this tutorial. So to go through it a little bit in an overview and reflect over it, what we have created are 3 different parts of an attack. We have the pre-charge, we have the charge, which is looping, and we have the charge release, which is the actual end of the attack. These are set up in the event graph of our animation blueprint, sorry, in our anim graph, in our animation blueprint. And we have a jump node, which we use as our starting point. Then we use our pre-charge and translate into the charge when it has finished playing. And the charge will transition into the attack once we have stopped holding down our key, which will then turn our boolean of charging to false. Our finished attack animation will then play out, and once it's done, it goes back into idle. Our character doesn't have a whole lot of logic, it just has an input we set up. It sets the boolean for charging and being true and false. It jumps to the jump node when it needs to. And that's essentially it. And then we added a small little Niagara system. We also added a socket to our sprite over here, so we have somewhere to put that Niagara system. And yeah, that's pretty much all you need to make a charging attack in 2D. Hope this was useful. That's all for now. Keep on learning. Take care. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you did not like it, leave a dislike. Leave any suggestions or comments you have down below. Subscribe and share this video if you want to see more like it in the future. That is all for now. Keep on learning. Take care.